Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into GC Live Talking Tuesday nights, the final edition of the regular season. South Carolina coming off a huge win against Tennessee, the Volunteers this past weekend, but now the attention is on to Clemson, a series that the Tigers have just dominated over the last decade, you could say. They've won the last 7 meetings, and that spans over 8 years since that 2020 matchup was canceled because of COVID. I bring all this up because, look, what a difference a week makes. We were sitting here last week trying to figure out what South Carolina could do to be able to just find some type of positive note to end the regular season on, having to play Tennessee, having to play at Clemson. And I think a lot of us just looked at it and assumed, okay, 6-6, that's what it's going to be. They're going to be 6-6. They're going to go to a bowl game. I don't know what bowl game that would be, but hey, they're going to be 6-6 and go to a bowl game. But give a lot of credit to Shane Beamer and the staff. Marcus Satterfield called the game of his life. I think Beamer said something along that line tonight, and I know we have intern Joe on the horn with us, and I know he was listening to some of that, so we'll have intern Joe hop on in a second as Beamer had his weekly Carolina Call show pushed up to Tuesday this week because, of course, on Thursday is Thanksgiving. So where do we begin tonight? Where do we begin? Well, I'll have intern Joe hop on with us. Frederick, how we doing? Intern Joe, I'm just going to get right to you. We'll call it the season of giving since it is Thanksgiving on Thursday. Where do you want to begin? Do you want to do we fully just talk about Clemson, or do you want to kind of look back at the week that was just a little bit?
I mean, I think we have to talk about Tennessee a little bit, right? Because, I mean, the post-game show, we got a lot of calls, man. That was the most I've ever been worked on a post-game show. That's for darn sure. But, I mean, I really do. I think you have to acknowledge it. There was a lot of talk about it at the pressers today. And, Beamer mentioned, he joked that Justin King is technically on a little bit of a Tennessee Twitter probation, if you will, because he told him to stop tweeting about Tennessee because their focus – it's obviously on to Clemson, but I mean, it's a big enough win. Like we have to talk about it and talk about how it translates going into next week with Clemson and whatnot. And like I said, there was plenty of Tennessee talk at the pressers today, along with Clemson stuff. So I think, start off, we have to talk about Clemson, or we have to talk about Tennessee. Sorry. We'll get to Clemson stuff, obviously, because they're, just another top 10 team. They're just, they're enough of a handful, if not more of a handful for the Gamecocks coming into this one. But, yeah, I mean, Mike, like you said it, Beamer said it too on the call-in show. He said Satterfield really coached the game of his life. And, leading up to it, obviously we know all the criticism that he got, knowing all of,
we'll get right into it. Joe, I'm going to cut you off right there. Because Steven, I'm sure you're not one of the only people out there that feel this way. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I could say it. Beamer could say it. Eric Douglas going into the locker room saying, hey, Beamer, we need to give a game ball to Marcus Satterfield. I mean, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that won't believe that Satterfield could call the game that he did. Now, listen. If you've been paying attention to what we've been saying on this program and other platforms, of course, on Gamecock Central, but if you listen to me, I was on the SEC radio, Sirius XM. Was that today? Today, I'm losing my mind. Today, McElroy and Cole Kubelik's program yesterday. Everything that I've said has been very consistent this season, which is I think there's a lot of things that Satterfield's trying to do that you could see. It's like, I understand why he's trying to do that. But then we reached a point where it's like, that relationship comparison where it's like, okay, you could bring a lot of good to the relationship, but at some point you have to ask yourself, is this going to work? Are we just trying to make it work? You have to be honest with yourself. And I think for a lot of us, we looked at what took place during the Missouri game. We saw what took place against Florida. And I think a lot of us said, you know what? But that move probably won't happen until the end of the regular season at the earliest. Then we see what he does the other night. To the people that don't want to give him credit, no one is saying that this deserves a contract extension. There's going to be some conversations with that, though. No one's saying build a statue. No one's saying that you got to send him a freaking Christmas card. No one's saying any of those things. All we're saying is give the man some freaking credit, okay? Give the man some credit, all right? He's in a position where criticism will rightfully be directed towards him, the head coach, and the quarterback when the offense and the team's not playing well. Those are the three. Those are the three spots: head coach, QB, offensive coordinator, typically, and then defense. Throw the defensive coordinator in there too, right? But those are the people that usually get the most criticism after games when they lose. So I bring all that up though, Joe, because is it really hard to believe that the same man that had an incredible game plan against North Carolina a year ago could call a phenomenal game against the seventh worst pass defense in the country?
No, absolutely not.
And I'm not, when I say that, that's not trying to take anything away from Satterfield. What I'm trying to get at is there's so many people that are trying to do mental gymnastics. And Steven, I'm not picking on you because you're not the only one that probably feels that way. I get that. But what I'm trying to get at is just like, is it really that hard to believe? And I know the next question, well, where was this all season? That's a fair question. It's a fair question, Joe. I don't know if Beamer answered that tonight. I know he talked about it earlier today, saying some of the things they did, which were a lot of the things that I was told, from people that are close to the program and inside the program, which were they condensed the playbook. They focused on the core amount of plays that they wanted to be able to do, and they just were able to go out there and execute it. They made it simple. And I know that people are going to be like, well, where was that earlier in that? They've tried to do that. They have. They certainly did some different things this week, and there's no question about that, right? To carry on Joyner at quarterback a little bit more, right? They did more things. But what you also need to take into consideration is they didn't have Marshawn Lloyd, which they've had for the majority of the season. Okay, of course, they didn't have him against Florida, but they've had him for the majority of the season. Christian Beal-Smith, your number 2 running back. I know he's been plagued with injuries throughout the course of the year, but you didn't have your top 2 guys. That hasn't been the case all season. So I'm not saying that those 2 guys, without them, you're a better team. But the point being is you kind of had to do some extra things. You were kind of left with no choice, that you had to make something happen. And they finally were able to condense it to a point where these guys were just able to go out there and ball and execute, and give credit to the O-line, give credit to the tight ends with their blocking, give credit to Justin Stepp and the wide receivers for the tremendous perimeter blocking, and of course, give credit to Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. And I loved what you said too. It's not without the realm of, or it's not outside of the realm of possibilities if you factor in last year, right? We've seen Satterfield put together some really, really good game plans for specific teams, i.e. the North Carolina game. And without Marshawn Lloyd and CBS, you were going to have this game plan be super tight, super compact, and let the players go out there and play. And honestly, Mike, I think that's what this offense has been waiting for. They've been waiting for kind of a smaller game plan, something where they can just go out and execute. And Spencer has always been that type of player where, like, just give me the playbook. We're going to get there. We're going to go and we're going to run with it. And that's always how it's been with him. And I think by condensing the playbook and by having, I guess, if you will, limited options on offense, they had to be more detailed in the game plan. They had to be more purposeful on offense. And I think that's what led to 63 points and 600 yards. Now, did we see that coming in the realm of possibility to the extent and the magnitude that the points and yards came from? No, absolutely not. But, I mean, it's not without the realm of possibility that, it is, Satterfield has put together really, really good game plans. And again, like Mike, you said, a relationship can be going bad overall, and you can still have good moments, right? But I think, overall, I think Satterfield, it's coming to an end. But Saturday night was certainly an example of what he can do and what he has been able to do, from a weekend standpoint.
And again, and I see some of the comments Dwayne mentioning about Clemson. We're going to get to Clemson in a little bit. But, yeah, I think here's the best way to look at it. We're in late November.
Yeah.
11 games in. 1 regular season game to go. The question that I would ask Gamecock fans is this. Do you feel better about your offense right now in comparison to where you felt about the offense a week ago? Now, no one is saying that all the problems are gone. No one is saying to forget about what happened against Missouri. No one's saying forget about what happened against Florida. As Justin mentioned, Florida, of course, they weren't one of the better defenses, and South Carolina wasn't able to take advantage of that. No one's saying to forget all of that. All I'm asking is, do you feel better about what the offense is capable of doing after seeing what happened last week? To me, if I had to answer that question, to me, I would say yes, but a skeptical yes, right? It would kind of be like looking at the glass like, okay, instead of it being half empty, it's half full today. I think what it proved is something that a lot of us who are scratching our heads all season long, especially about the offense, we were saying they have the talent. And this is the stuff that we've been talking. They have the talent. And I said this earlier the week on with Alyssa Lang and Chris Dorian when I hopped on Sirius XM, which is no one is saying that they have SEC East championship title right now. No one's saying that. But the talent that they have, again, especially on offense, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to have more success this season. And I think seeing, right, going back to something maybe we said earlier this year, Joe, something my high school coach would always say, they've had the tools, they just haven't had the toolbox. This past weekend, they had the toolbox. They were able to put the tools in the toolbox, and look what happened. They went right to work. So I think it gives you a glimmer of hope, but it also gives you visually, you can actually watch it in a game. It's not just Beamer saying, well, we had a good practice, or this happened here, or, I'm making this up, Juice Wells coming in a press conference, be like, oh, yeah, Spencer looked great in practice, this and that. No. You saw it on the field. And then if we go back earlier in the season, when we got to around week 4, week 5, when people were talking about, well, they're doing it against TikTok Tech. You got Charlotte, who fired their coach in the middle of the season. You got SC State. They should be able to take care of those teams. They did. And then what happened? They beat Kentucky. So they've been able to find ways to beat teams that are better than them. I know there's people going to be like, well, look what happened this season with Kentucky and this and that. Stop moving the goalposts. Stop moving the goalposts. The whole point is that this team, and my whole point, what I'm trying to get at is this team is capable of being able to play against Power 5 teams and do well. We saw that against Tennessee. But for people to be like, okay, well, that's a fluke. They've done it this season. It's not to say the offense was the reason why they won those games. The defense obviously played a big part. Special teams played a big part. Special teams wasn't the reason why you won this past week. They did their job. Okay? They didn't cost you the game. But I think a lot of people, if you would have said, okay, South Carolina is going to beat Tennessee, I think people would just assume such special teams would have played a big role. And again, I'm not saying like, Kai Kroger, that speaks for itself. What I'm talking about is a game-changing play like we've seen this season. Block kick, turnover on special teams. That's what I'm talking about. So, Joe, I say all that because this Clemson team, when we get into it a little bit, defensively, the matchup's going to be much, much tougher. We know that. We know that. But from a confidence standpoint, I had Ryan Brewer on just yesterday for Mixing a Water Monday. And that was one thing that he really, really focused on was that confidence boost. Being able to go out there and do it on the field against a good team. And not just beat them, but freaking kick their teeth in. Kick their teeth in. They executed offensively as well as you could have asked for. Nearly a flawless game.
Oh, yeah, Mike, absolutely. And you were right. I mean, this team has always had the talent. And I think, it goes to show, and especially after Florida, I don't necessarily know if anybody was really giving this team any credit to that, right? Like, they went out at Florida and laid a goose egg and offensively, and nobody thought they had any shot in this game against Tennessee, Mike. And, they turned it around and proved, the entire world wrong that they do have the talent. They can stand and bang against some of these bigger Power 5 teams. And that South Carolina, has the potential to be a bigger program in the SEC, too, to that point. Because Tennessee, for all intents and purposes, going into that game was proving that, they're here to stay and they are going to be on top of the SEC and, try to contend with Georgia and Alabama and all of that stuff. And, honestly, Mike, Saturday night kind of proved that wrong. It was kind of the flip side, proved that, anybody can really stand and bang in the SEC now that obviously Georgia is, evolving into the top, but now that Alabama is, starting to trend downwards, if you will. I don't necessarily know if Alabama can trend down, but, anybody can really compete in the SEC, and it's everybody after Georgia, really.
Mhm.
And it's proving that South Carolina and Shane Beamer are building something here too. It's not necessarily like he can get talent, and I mean we saw in his first year too, Mike. We saw in his first year where he, kind of, it was he did what he could with the talent that he had, and they still produced. They still were bowl eligible and won the Duke's Mayo. Like Beamer is a really, really good coach, and this is just a testament of what he's trying to build here.
So a couple things I want to mention, right? David mentions, supposedly Satterfield called the play. He called the plays.
All right.
Called the plays. If people want to have that narrative out, that's fine. Again, if you've been listening to everything I've said, I think you know where I stand on everything. Because you're going to try to defend. Again, listen to everything. Listen to everything I've said. All right. You go back and look at what they did the other night. And I know Beamer kind of mentioned it today, Joe. So if there's anything in particular, point it out to me. But a couple things that stood out to me that what South Carolina did, and this is from talking to people close to the program as well. And we kind of hit on it before. They condensed the playbook to a point where they really just focused on the core of what that offense is trying to do. Now, the questions are going to be, like I said, like people are going to wonder where was that earlier? And they tried to do it, but a couple guys down, they really let it rip. Okay. So let's put that conversation aside. That's not going to change what happened. Let's just try to get down to what was different the other night. That was one thing. The other thing too, and you may have noticed, is Rattler really wasn't looking over to the sideline as much, if at all, during Saturday's game. That's something pre-snap that he would do a lot, right? He'd look over, right? And that goes back even to last year when they were playing musical chairs at quarterback. So I bring those things up because Rattler mentioned today that the tempo was up. The tempo was up. Just those little, they weren't substituting as much on offense. And they were just able to go out there and just execute. So again, I understand the people that might not be a fan of Satterfield, might not be a fan of the offensive play calling in general, might be skeptical, might just be a Gamecock fan that, you've seen this song and dance with teams in the past in some shape, way, or form, and you just don't want to believe it. I get that, okay? I get that. But we've seen Satterfield call good games going back to last year. So I just think it's kind of ridiculous that people want to just, give the guy credit. Again, no one's asking you to have him over for dinner. No one's asking you to send him a Christmas card or give him a contract extension. Okay? No one's asking you that. All we're saying, give the man credit for what happened the other night. I just think it's ridiculous that some of the comments are still coming out about that. Now, with that being said, and the defense, you got to give them a lot of credit. But sticking with the offense for a minute, looking ahead now to Clemson, this matchup is going to be much, much, much more difficult. That Clemson front is one of the best. They are one of the best in the country. And this team as a whole, but especially the defense, they get better as the game goes on. That's one thing that I've really noticed about this defense. They get better as the game goes on. It's different. Brett Venables isn't calling the defense anymore for the Tigers, but he's also, but they're also a team that still has a lot of, I'd say, the core values that Venables was trying to, install. And I'm not talking schematically. I'm just talking from a mentality standpoint. So it's still a very, very difficult defense to play against. And again, going up against the Tennessee defense that you played this past weekend, not trying to take anything away, but it's going to be different. It's going to be different. I will say this, though, and I see David mention Clemson's pass defense. Yeah, that's one. You're going to have to be able to beat them through the air, okay? You're going to have to be able to beat them through the air. There's no question about it. Are they as bad as, I'm trying to pull up the stats right now. That's why I'm kind of dragging things out here, trying to find this real quick. Are they as bad as Tennessee? No. Tennessee now, after that performance, believe it or not, how crazy is this? Tennessee has the second worst pass defense in the country. Second worst pass defense in the country. That's incredible. That's incredible. Ohio, not Ohio State, not the Ohio State. Ohio, the Bobcats are in dead last, 312 yards a game. Tennessee's allowing 303 a game. It's incredible. Clemson's pass defense, they would be considered middle of the pack. They're ranked 51st, okay? 51st, allowing just over 210 yards a game, 214 to be exact. And, give you an idea where South Carolina stands in all this. South Carolina ranks 43rd. So you've been seeing South Carolina's defense all year, and I know people say SEC. Just play along with me, okay? Give you an idea from a pass defense standpoint. Go through some of the comments real quickly. Patrick says, Gaffney versus Dutch Fork for Upper State. Make the trip, Mike. I'll be here. I will be here. Patriots and Vikings play on Thursday. That's why different location tonight. Actually at Gillette Stadium currently. They are, but good luck though. Both teams. Fun matchup when those guys play. Brent was saying, he has only called 2 games good in 2 years. Bowl game. Again, Brent, no one is Again, no one is asking you to go over and fluff the guy's pillow. How hard is it to just say, the guy called a freaking good game? Goodness. Tater's offense, not Tennessee's 5. I agree with that. Clemson's offense is certainly not the same Clemson offensive bowl. I am a big fan, though, of how DJ Uiagalelei plays when he's on. I think he's a tough kid. He's a tough kid. And you have to be on your game with being able to tackle him. I mean, before the season, I could be off a couple pounds, but I think 10, 15 pounds, I think he said that he was going to drop, and he's trying to be a little bit more dynamic in his game. Is the passing as good as Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson was? No. But he still has an arm that you can't sleep on, I think it'd be, I'm not saying you're saying this, Brent, maybe you are though. I think it would be premature to say that, DJ is not someone that can beat you because of his arm. He's a dual threat quarterback, number one, but his arm isn't something to sleep on. Again, has he had the greatest season in the world? No. And the crazy thing too is, and it depends which outlet you're getting your news, your stats from. But I believe Spencer Rattler and DJ have the exact same amount of passing yards. I think it's like 2,406, something like that. And again, depending on where you're getting it from, could be off a little bit, a yard or two. But the point being is, those guys are pretty even from a statistical standpoint. And kind of like Rattler, DJ has had games where he's been up and then he's been down. But when he's had big games, he's had big games. Obviously, nothing like what Rattler did the other night, but to try to give you an idea. Joe, what's on your mind after hearing all this?
I will say I watched DJ play Notre Dame because that game was simultaneously. I had my father down in Columbia with me, a Notre Dame grad. So obviously that game took priority on the big screen, and I was watching South Carolina on the laptop. But I agree. I think DJ Uiagalelei is a lot like Hendon Hooker and KJ Jefferson in a way. He's like the elite level quarterbacks this defense has seen. And I think, this defense matches up pretty well. DJ really wants to throw the ball. And it's very similar to Hendon Hooker. DJ will use his legs when he wants to, but would like to throw the ball. And I think, again, there's a good matchup there in the secondary, like, South Carolina did against Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Also, another thing I saw Justin's comment about, Notre Dame running the ball. Notre Dame had 2 backs that were in the 100-yard range. I think South Carolina has the potential to do the same thing if they were to, with Marshawn Lloyd and CBS, if they were back. Now, granted, they're banged up, so I don't know, how much of a factor they would be. Now, full health, I mean, I would definitely see, Satterfield try to replicate some of the same game plan that Notre Dame had. But
Mm-hmm.
Mike, I think, this week it's more of it'll be more of the same with, trying to do the best with what you have. Again, with Satterfield, because you don't know if you're going to have Marshawn or CBS. So your game planning is if you don't really. So I think, with as, I guess, bad, if you will, as middle of the road or as mediocre as this Clemson secondary is, I would expect to see more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, we talked about, I guess, running the ball is these swing passes, these reverses, all of this behind the line stuff. I would expect to see a lot more of that. Even though they showed a lot of it at Tennessee, it worked. It really did, and it forced the defense to really match up and fit their gaps and be disciplined with it. And I think that's something, especially at Notre Dame, that Clemson really, put on tape, was that they were very undisciplined defensively. When you kind of mix it up in the run game, Notre Dame ran a lot of reverses that game. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's two options to attack this defense, and definitely it's more of the same with throwing the ball, but also I think if you keep up more of the same with in terms of like the swing passes, the behind line stuff, similar stuff to what we saw against Tennessee. Like I honestly don't think they're that different. One plays in the SEC, and then the other one is Clemson and plays in the ACC. And now, I think Clemson's a better football team, and I think they're going to be a little bit more of a challenge. But I think it's relatively a similar game plan. Obviously, you're tweaking up, but the front sevens. I mean, everyone's hyping up the Clemson front seven. Where did we hear this? We heard it last week with Tennessee. So I mean, it's got to be a relatively similar game plan, Mike.
Yeah, it does. And there's some questions about the weather, and I do want to hit on those. I will say this, though, and I know the SEC people don't want to admit it ever, and I love the SEC. I love me the SEC, trust me. But if you've been paying attention to the ACC this year, the conference has been better in comparison to years past. I mean, that's just the fact. You can go look at the numbers from a ranking standpoint, how many ranked teams they've had. The competition is up. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean the ACC is better than the SEC. That doesn't mean the ACC is the second best conference or the third best. No one's saying that. All I'm saying is the conference is better. So the conference is better. And look, at the end of the day, even the conference wasn't. I mean, Clemson has just been really good. I mean, just give them credit. Clemson has been a really good freaking team. And if anyone should know that, it should be South Carolina. They've beat you 7 straight times. 7. The only other time that they've done that, you have to go all the way back to, I believe, Joe, the 30s, the 1930s. So, look, is that something that's going to be on the mind of the players? Probably not. Is that something that Beamer maybe mentions once during the week? Maybe on game day, like, hey, this is a big game, blah, blah, blah. They've won 7 straight. Maybe he mentions it once. But I've always been a firm believer in when you play in a game like this, it doesn't really matter what the streak is, 7, 8, 9, whatever the case may be, 4 or 5. Certainly as a player, you'll think a little bit about it. But these guys weren't here for all 7 of those losses. You know what I mean? Like, they've been here. Now, this is where the motivation comes in. If you're a DeCarrion Joyner, if you're an Eric Douglas, if you're a Brad Johnson, if you're one of these seniors that, and again, DeCarrion, we don't know what's going to happen next year. I know he walked, but he still has a year of eligibility. But for the sake of conversation, right, we'll call that this is his last game, regular season game. This is his last opportunity to be able to beat Clemson. This is something that those seniors have never been able to do before. So I feel like when you talk about motivation, again, from a fan standpoint, from a media standpoint, from a talking point standpoint, yes, that number 7 is relevant. But if you're a player for South Carolina, 7, okay, you hear it once, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything to you. It shouldn't. What it meant, what should matter is, hey, I want to go beat them because I haven't beat them before. Okay, and that's not to say that I say it shouldn't matter. If that's your way to be able to find added motivation, then go for it. Whatever you need to be able to do to find added motivation. But what I'm trying to get at is, it's not about the streak as a whole for these players, and a lot of them. I mean, 6-year guys, they've been part of a lot of losses to Clemson. To be able to finally get that one. I mean, I talk with, I've developed a good relationship with Taj Boyd over the years. I mean, God, what a guy that shows a lot of humility. Because South Carolina, that was when they were at their peak, and Clemson had pretty good teams then. but he wasn't able to do that, and that's something that, he lives with every time he gets into Columbia. If I'm with him and I hear Gamecock fans coming up and, he plays it off because that's all he can do. That's all he can do. But if you're to carry on Joyner, you don't want to have to play it off, right? If you go out 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you want to be able to say, yeah, well, I beat them my last time. I beat my last time. I do want to bring this up, though, Joe, because I said that some people had mentioned this weather-wise. Linus, our good friend Linus, good to see you on here tonight. What concerns are there for rain? Good for us, bad for us. And Dwayne also said, let's say it rains Saturday as expected. Which team do you think this will favor? I think who it favors more than anything is South Carolina, because that pass rush that we're talking about, the front, not just the pass rush, but just the front in general, that push that the defensive line has for Clemson, it will slow them down depending on the amount of rain that you have, right? And anyone that has played this game can tell you that. When you play on a grass field and you get some rain, right? It's, makes the field a little bit slippery. It slows down that pass rush a little bit. And the good quarterbacks of the world will tell you that it helps slow the game down. Because you think about it, right? Everyone else is going to be playing a little bit slower if that field is in a condition where it just, you can't move as quickly. And as a quarterback and as an offense, you know where the ball's going. You know what the play is. So if anything, that should slow down everything for you. And for a guy like Spencer Rattler, I know he hasn't had the season that he probably envisioned and dreamed of, but I think he's shown us at times that he's capable of really, when he's locked in and things are just clicking, he can really play at a different level. We saw that this past weekend, Joe. So I think more than anything, if rain does make an impact, if it does impact anyone on the field, it'll impact the defense. And in South Carolina's defense will be in the same boat, no question about it. But I just think who it helps, I would say South Carolina, because I think when we talk about just the impact that Clemson defensive line can have, if you can slow them down at all, it's certainly only going to help you out a little bit more.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. And I mean, if you think about it, right, like if it's a downpour, it's going to be hard to throw the ball, granted, for anybody. But on paper, Clemson has the best team. Now, hear me out. On paper. And so when you get something like rain like that, and, it adds to the fact that it kind of levels the playing field almost, if you will. Now, and granted, with the momentum that the South Carolina team has had and is building, I think it definitely adds, definitely towards South Carolina's side, definitely levels the playing field a little bit more too, coming off a big win like that. Because Spencer mentioned today in his presser that, they keep the confidence. 63 points, it's a lot. So they keep the confidence rolling into this week. And obviously they're trying not to be too high off it. But, this was the first time all season that the offense has worked as well as it has. And so it's definitely something to hold your head high on, like, okay, like we can do this. And also to beat a team like Tennessee that's really, 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 really similar, and to have kind of a similar game plan, like I just said, Mike, it definitely helps with the confidence. So if anything, the rain is going to help. You're right. It's going to help South Carolina. But obviously, if it's a downpour, both teams trying to throw the ball, it's going to turn into a mud bowl, which obviously honestly wouldn't be that hard to watch. I think it'd be kind of fun, a little rivalry week mud bowl.
And look, I mean, South Carolina, as well as they passed the football the other night, they ran the ball well too. Yeah. And we've talked about it so much, Joe, how important it is for this offense to be able to run the football. Satterfield has mentioned it throughout the course of the season. You talk about identity. That's such a crutch phrase that people like to lean on when they're talking about football. And, for the sake of this conversation, we'll lean on it right now, talking about identity. The identity of this offense is they need to be able to run the football. And we've seen that, right? As well as the passing game was the other day, and as poor as Tennessee's pass defense is, it opens things up when you're able to run the ball. There's no question about it. It's like little Johnny. I probably have made this comparison before. Little Johnny, who's a one-trick pony. He can only dribble with his right hand. Well, if you take away his right hand, guess what? He's not going to do anything. So if they're just going to pass, that's going to be able to make their day a hell of a lot easier, especially when you go up against a good defensive line who's really good at pass rushing. You just put your hand in the dirt, and they're going to be passing, taking it off. Right? Yeah. Just going right after the quarterback. You have to be able to mix it up, just kind of like a pitcher, right? Can't be throwing just fastballs. Got to throw in some breaking balls, got to throw something off speed a little bit to be able to throw off the rhythm of the guys up front. And for South Carolina, look, we saw Jaheim Bell have a phenomenal game at running back the other day. Had a phenomenal game. I don't know what it will look like this week if Marshawn is in the lineup, if Christian Beal-Smith is in the lineup. I don't hate seeing Jaheim Bell in the backfield. I know some Gamecock fans, especially throughout the course of the season, probably before the other night, you're probably like, I'm done with that, okay? Ryan Brew and Marcus Lattimore, they kind of differ in terms of their opinion on Jaheim at running back. But Brewer gave him a lot of credit the other night. Brewer gave him a lot of credit, and you can see why he's in the backfield. So, again, we'll have to wait and see as far as the injury front. Before we get back into some of these things, Joe, and I let you get to some of your thoughts, want to make sure that we hit our sponsors. And look, tax season is right around the corner. Liberty Tax, those are the people you want to give a call to. They can take your tax ID away. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. Once again, that is Liberty Tax, helping you take away your tax ID. And today's program is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond over at the Mortgage Network. Clint does an outstanding job of being able to take some of the anxiety away. Talk about tax anxiety. He takes away the anxiety when you're trying to buy a home, making that process a hell of a lot easier. Former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth, who you see here on the postgame show every other week, he just got a home. And the guy that he gave a call, well, that was Clint Hammond. So give Clint a call at 803-576-4450. Clint Hammond and Liberty Tax, both great sponsors of the program. Let's get right back into it, Joe. Looking at some of these comments here. Big Red, if we can get into the secondary, we should do well against Clemson's defense. The front seven is brutal. No question about it. That's what it's going to come down to. And as Joe mentioned before, that was a similar narrative to an extent. I think Clemson's pass. I think honestly, to compare it, I think this will be the best front that they'll see all season since Georgia. I think it's right up there. Now, Kentucky, we talked about that before. Kentucky had a very good front. I know their seasons kind of took a turn for the worse over the last couple of weeks, but as we said all week long during that Kentucky game, going into the Kentucky game, stingy. This front's just different. They're big, they're faster. You need to be able to find a way to, yes, get into that secondary, attack that secondary. And a lot of it's going to fall on the arms of the offensive line. They have to do a great job blocking. The tight end play, who, by the way, and I mentioned this during the course of the game, and I'm glad other people out there, I saw our colleague Chris Clark mention it, Joe. I'm so freaking glad that Nate Atkins is finally getting recognized for what he's doing. What he did the other night, I think a lot of people who weren't paying attention as closely to him, they started to see it. But this is what I've been saying all season about Nate. And it goes back to what his father, Greg, told me when he transferred into the program. I remember going up saying to him, I said, hey, that's awesome. That's going to be really neat, an opportunity to be able to be around your son more. It's a tough job where you're hopping around. Don't get to see your son really play as much in person. Now you get to be there. And he said, the first thing he said with this, a straight face, is like, I promise you, like, he's not just coming here to just be here sitting in a jersey. Like, this kid can play. And getting to know Greg in a short period of time made me believe, like, he's not just saying that. Like, Greg won't just say stuff to blow smoke up, anyone's ass. So to see Nate do that, I mean, it's been awesome. But you need that, Joe. You need tremendous blocking this weekend if you want any chance to be able to play with Clemson, to be able to open the passing game.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I am the biggest Nate Atkins believer of all time. Like, I think, he's been a crucial part of this offense throughout the year. And now he's finally getting some shine. And, he was in the presser today, lively as ever, doing his thing. And you talk about his dad, Mike. Like, his dad was one of the first coaches to kind of come up to me, ask me if I'm all right. Just introduce himself to me, made me feel like a member of the media, really. And so shout out to Greg Atkins. I really hope he's doing well. And Nate has played up to par. Like, he had a really, really, really big game on Saturday night, and it's ever more deserving. So he's one of the unsung heroes on this South Carolina team. And, as a fullback / tight end, you don't necessarily get a lot of credit. And now with, all these running backs being out, he's playing a little bit more of a fullback role. And Mike,
Mhm.
too, with Jaheim in the backfield, I think Nate Atkins is the most important, one of the most important pieces on this offense, if you will, when blocking for Jaheim, because they use Nate Atkins a lot when Jaheim was in the backfield and, running that, kind of pitch or swung him out wide. Nate Atkins was usually the first guy pulling, getting out there, picking up a linebacker, and he's just such a big dude, man. He is such a big guy. When you have a big body like that that can move across the field, pick up a linebacker, and just lay somebody out, quite frankly, it's huge especially for like when you have a guy like Jaheim Bell moving back into the backfield, somebody who doesn't necessarily normally play, I guess, running back or swing back or whatever you want to call it. Nate Atkins is such a big piece, and now that he's finally getting his shine, I'm so happy for him, and I'm so happy for his family too. And again, like I said, I hope his dad's doing well. He mentioned that he is doing a little bit better, and so again,
Good.
hope the best for Coach Atkins.
That's good. Big Red says, did we show our hand too much against Tennessee? Not many special plays left in the bag. The way I'd answer that is yes and no. And here's why I say yes. South Carolina did some things, more so from a wrinkle standpoint, right? But they did some things that we haven't seen from them all season long. And a lot of it had to do with personnel. And a lot of it also had to do with just that tempo, that fast pace, the stuff that I know a lot of fans have been asking for all season. And at least they execute. They've tried to do slants at times. They've tried to do quick passes. It's just, for whatever reason, some of it just wasn't there. But they really, really hammered it this week. And it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier from the conversations that I've had with people inside the building, which is they really just focused on condensing things down to a point where you just focus on the core. And as we saw, they are very capable of moving the football at a very efficient rate when they do that. So I think when you do those kind of things, we talk about trick plays, obviously, right? But it's more so to me, different formations, different packages. I think what it's going to allow South Carolina now is Clemson's going to have to spend more time preparing for those things. And when you have 12, think about this, 12 different players had a reception the other night. 12 different players. Of course, Rattler was in that mix on the throwback pass. DeCarrion Joyner had a catch in there as well. But I bring that up because you have to prepare for everybody. And when you have the type of offensive explosion that you had the other night, it wasn't just, again, going back to little Johnny, the one trick wonder pony who can only dribble with his right hand. It's not like they just did it through the air. They ran the ball well too. And multiple players made an impact. If this was just the, Rattler throwing, 400 something yards and Juice Wells had 300 receiving yards. Okay, everyone knows now to be ready for Juice. They've been ready to cover Juice, but it was all spread out. And everyone knows, okay, Juice Wells is a very talented player. You have to keep an eye on him. Well, look what happened with Josh Fan. Josh Fan did some great things the other night. But then you got Jaheim Bell over here, and Jaheim Bell scored a couple times. And then you also, oh my goodness, you got Jalen Brooks scoring touchdowns. Never mind the running game. So they're going to have to be prepared for everything. And that's not even talking about, and I've seen a couple people mention it before, as Joshua says, and I know other people mentioned it in the comment section, about DeCarrion Joyner. Something makes me just believe and feel that we will see DK at quarterback several times this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Several times. I don't think I'm really going out on a limb saying that. And I think what we'll see DeCarrion do is we'll see him do more things than just run the football. I think that's the biggest thing, right? And we talked about this before with Jaheim Bell. And I compared him to DeCarrion Joyner in years past during the Muschamp era. Don't just do things for the sake of doing them, okay? Do it with the purpose. And when you have DeCarrion Joyner out there, add in some things that will keep a defense honest. Don't just go out there and just have them friggin' run the football. Now, I'm sure there's different things that they're seeing, and I'm saying they mean the coaching staff. They're seeing things, okay? But yes, DeCarrion is more than capable of being able to throw the football to a point where you should feel like you should be able to trust him. I'm not saying that he's the guy that should go out there and, he's throwing the ball 30 times a game. No. I feel like Rattler has proven that, especially the other night. And you don't want to take that off the field as much, right? I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady, but just for a sake of for a name, because I know that not everyone follows the NFL here, but you're not going to take Tom Brady off the field 30 times so you can let another guy throw the football around. So I bring that up because DeCarrion brings an added dimension to your offense that Rattler just doesn't have. And that's not saying Rattler is not athletic. He can't run the football, but I mean, we see the difference. We see the difference, right? I mean, imagine if Spencer Rattler was asked to go play receiver, you wouldn't probably think that, right? DeCarrion could probably play multiple positions. QB, of course, receiver. He could probably play some running back if needed, right? The guy can do it all. He's back there receiving punts and kickoffs and all that kind of stuff. So I bring all that up because, yes, add some wrinkles in there for him. Another comment from Big Red. Will special teams and turnovers be the difference against the Tigers? Joe, I'm going to let you take over for this because this is something I think maybe outside of the Florida game. All right, it could be wrong. Outside of the Florida game, every time South Carolina has forced a turnover, they've won, except for that one.
Yeah, Mike, and Beamer talked about it on his call-in show. I'm pulling it up right now. I can't remember the exact 3 keys of the game, I believe. So, yeah, he said win the turnover battle. He said, there's a lot of games in his coaching tenure at South Carolina where they've won the coaching battle and won the game. I think it's a big thing for them. Controlling the line of scrimmage too, Big Red. It's another big thing. Obviously, you want to do that, especially if it rains too. You gotta be able to run the football. And then same thing with the SEC, like right, playing an SEC opponent, it doesn't not translate against Clemson. Just Clemson's just as good as another SEC team that you're going to face. Controlling the line of scrimmage, being physical, winning the turnover battle, and obviously special teams. Beamer, he talked about it in length in his call-in show. He's like, we didn't really get the chance to make any special teams magic happen because our offense was so good. But that's not going to be the case. You're not going to be able to go out there and have the magical offensive performance like you had against Tennessee week to week. Like, I hate to break it to you, that's just not going to happen. So he said, you're going to need that special teams magic. You're going to need some of that Beamer ball energy to really come through. And Pete Lembo, once again, has a chance to shine and prove why he's a Broyles Award finalist. Absolutely.
Yes, shout out to Pete. I think it's semifinalists. I don't know exactly. They're cutting the list down. It'll get cut down again to finalists next Tuesday or next Monday, excuse me. And then the following week they'll announce it. But I mean that's a hell of a list to be on. Hell of a list. And I think all of us are a little biased based on seeing Pete all the time and seeing the work that he's done at South Carolina, but I think it would be a travesty if he's not at least a finalist. There's some very talented coaches on that list. And, sometimes things like that, teams who have better records sometimes get it. In this case, I don't think that should matter because you look at the impact he's had. And if it's the best assistant coach, if he's not on this team, if he's not part of this program this year, the impact, and that's not saying Beamer doesn't know what he's doing on special teams. He knows what he's doing on special teams. But what Lembo has done, it's absolutely, absolutely incredible. And it's not just him as well. I mean, they have some tremendous analysts also there, and they just do an outstanding job.
Shout out Pete Lembo for sure.
Joe, looks like do you want to play some audio there? It looks like you got some.
So I've got a couple things pulled up. So I've got Spencer talking about. I know we were talking about Satterfield earlier, and we mentioned that Spencer did say something in the press conference just about Satterfield's game plan. I can pull that out if we want to run with it.
Yep, you let me know when you're good to go, buddy.
Good to go. Yeah.
All right. Here's Spencer Rattler from earlier today.
How as good as you played and as good as you feel after this game, how good does it feel? Must it feel for Coach Sat, who obviously is a lightning rod for a lot of criticism when the offense doesn't work?
Yeah, no, he called a great game. He was very happy after the game, but him, he's ready to get back to work. He's ready to put another game plan together and just lead us this week with what we got to do, and then hopefully he'll call another game like that. We're all pushing for him, and he pushes for us, so we're family. We got to finish out strong.
Yep. Good. That's Spencer Rattler from earlier today. Players spoke, media availability. Beamer also spoke today. He also had Carolina calls this evening, which wrapped up at 6 to 7 over at Backstreet's Grill, and it was outside, so a little nippy. But I don't want to hear anyone talking about the freaking cold. It was freaking cold up here, and it is cold up here. Let's take a look at the weather here before I gonna have to go outside here. Oh, nice. It is 32 degrees out, so that's beautiful. Won't be that cold down in Clemson. this weekend. I can tell you that much. But that rain, as we've brought up before, I mean, it certainly can make an impact. It certainly can make an impact. I may have pulled this one up a little bit earlier. Jeff mentioning, couldn't block last year. That is something that you hope. I mean, you can just say you hope. You hope it's better. It needs to be better. I think one thing, though, too, Joe, Alyssa Lang asked me this question today. And she asked me, what do you think was just different on some of the things outside of, schematics? I think all last week, a lot of those players, all they had to keep hearing about was Jalen Hyatt, and how he was going to come back, and how was the revenge game, this and that. Well, lost in the mix and everything was the fact that, especially for those upperclassmen, that's going to be the last time they're ever going to play at Williams-Brice. And they didn't want to go out that way. They knew what had took place the week prior in Florida. They knew what happened the last time they played at Williams-Brice when they played Missouri. This was their last opportunity. They didn't want to go out that way. So I think it gave them added motivation. So I bring all that up because it's not true apples to apples, as we like to say. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to be talking about same stuff that we're talking about. Clemson's D-line, Clemson's D-line, Clemson's D-line. If those upperclassmen in particular, as we know, that offensive line is full of them. But if that offensive line and that offense as a whole can replicate that feeling of, you know what, people are writing us off. People are talking about this instead of that. They're not talking about us. They're not giving us credit. If they're able to find some added motivation through that, that could be their Jalen Hyatt motivation, if you will. And I don't think that's too crazy to say. So I bring that up because at the end of the day, it's all about execution. I don't care what type of motivation you have. I don't care if you stay up all night watching the entire Rocky series. I really don't freaking care. You could be friggin' blaring Eye of the Tiger as you're going to sleep. It doesn't matter. You have to go execute it on the field. But I think this team will have some added motivation. And especially, again, going back to one thing that we mentioned, while I don't think the players should necessarily be focused on seven straight, going for the 8th straight, what their focus should be on, obviously, is just winning the game, ending the streak, right? But I think their focus should really just be like, hey, you know what? I'm an upperclassman. I want to get this win. I've never beat Clemson. And if you're an underclassman and you're new to this, you're Nick Eamon-Worry, obviously you grew up, you in this area, you know what this game's all about. And I'll just, pick on someone real quick, like a Stone Bland from Mississippi. Stone understands that there's a rivalry. But the big thing that you need to remember, though, when you're a freshman, you're an underclassman, is to be able to make sure that you don't let those guys down. And I'm using Stone's name. I'm not saying Stone's going to let anyone down. But, just as a freshman, that should be your mindset because, a guy like Dacarrion Joyner, he came in here. The upperclassmen, there were some guys that had never beat Clemson. Think about that. And Dacarrion and those freshmen that year, they lost to Clemson. And you're probably thinking at the time, all right, well, we'll have a chance next year. We'll be able to do it eventually. For a guy like him and a lot of others, I mean, this is their last shot. Again, we'll find out what happens with Dacarrion afterwards. But again, we're just assuming that this is his last game in South Carolina as far as the rivalry is concerned. This is it. So if you're an underclassman, you should never, and I'm not saying Stone has this mentality, but you should never have that mentality of, we'll see what happens. If we lose, we'll get them next year. Ask Dacarrion how that's gone. Ask Eric Douglas how that's gone. Ask Brad Johnson. This is their last shot. So when you talk about motivation, again, my focus, if I'm a player, I'm not worried about the streak. It's a narrative that fans will talk about. It's a narrative that people like us and the media will talk about. But if you're a player, the focus should be on getting those seniors that win, helping them achieve something that they had never done before, have never done before. But you know what? They had never beat Texas A&M before. They had never beat Kentucky before. They've been able to do things this year. They had never beat a top, they beat Georgia a couple of years back, but They had never experienced a moment like that against Tennessee the other night, fans storming the field. To me, that's where the motivation should be, Joe.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. And I think, Darius Rush was asked about it today. If, he remembers the I guess the taste that was left in his mouth after last year. Obviously, yeah, they do. They got shut out at home. Like, there's no worse feeling than that, especially in a rivalry game. So for the guys that were here for that year, and you talk about some of the freshmen, coming in like the Stone Blaytons and the Nicky Minwaris. Granted, Nicky Minwaris been in the state; he should know enough already. But yeah, like the guys that were here last year, the guys that were freshmen last year should know plenty how bad it feels losing to that team from upstate, and also too the guys like DeCarrion Joyner who have one final chance to change the narrative surrounding their senior class. And to I guess, you brought up Taj Boyd earlier, to be able to say that they were the team to beat Clemson and to finally end the streak and stuff. Like, obviously that's a big thing, but it's not what they're worried about. They're going in. Darius Rush said it best. He said, we approach every week like a nameless, faceless opponent, really. Mm-hmm. And that's what seems to be, I guess the theme in the locker room in terms of just, I guess, Clemson and moving on. They're not necessarily worried about the streak, Mike. They're more worried about, just beating the team in front of them, and that just happens to be Clemson. And obviously there's a little bit more fuel to fire for sure. But
we're going to try to wrap things up as quickly as possible here. So let's listen to Shane Beamer, and then I know there's some other questions that have been asked, so I'm going to try to do my best to answer those before we wrap things up. So, Joe, just kind of set the scene for us first before you play the clip.
Yeah, so, I mean, Mike, we talked about it earlier, just about, how this team, after a big win, they got to, carry momentum into, a rivalry week, which has a lot of, I guess, emotion and angst tied to it already. But here's Beamer, I guess, just talking about how they can kind of ride the wave and kind of balance out a big win going into a rivalry week like Clemson.
Yeah, Coach. Obviously, Saturday was an explosive game, just offensively. Some of the players went here a second ago talking about, I guess, moving on to Clemson week. Just what are some ways, from your perspective, like what are some practical ways that you, I guess, tune out the noise from a 63-point outing and move that into, I guess, another week against a, top whatever team?
Yeah, quit talking about it. Honestly, I mean, I love Justin King and what they do, but I told him no more Tennessee videos. Like, you're amazing and brilliant at what you do, but I told him after the game on Saturday night, get it all out Sunday, Monday, because once the players come back in here on Tuesday, it's full speed ahead on the next opponent. And with the players, told about the practice today. They went to class on Monday and everybody was patting them on the back. Well, the Tuesday classes are different, so they're seeing those classmates for the first time since Saturday. So everybody will be patting them on the back, and told them the same thing, politely thank them, but we're moving on. And we didn't do a great job of that last year, honestly. We had an unbelievable home win against Auburn in 2021 and got bowl eligible. Played these guys 7 days later, and obviously we're not ready to perform like we needed to perform, and that's on me. And our guys are excited. Our guys certainly are very confident, but we know, and I told them today, like, there's a lot of reasons we played as well as we did last Saturday, but it started with our preparation during the week. So for us to have a chance to perform well on Saturday up there, we're going to have to prepare well during the week also, and it's easier said than done, because I've told you guys before, we get 4 hours a day with them in here, and they're out there the other 20 hours hearing how great they are as well. And certainly we want to build on what we did last week, but it's just moving on, and what we did last Saturday becomes even more special and even bigger if we were fortunate enough to win on Saturday. Then we can talk back, and Justin can tweet out all.
So that's Shane Beamer. Cut him off a little bit at the end. We're going to try to go real quick, though, here. Rapid fire as we hit that 8 o'clock hour. Big Red says, we change things up based on the availability of Christian Beal-Smith and Marshawn Lloyd. I think what we're going to see is those guys do everything they can to play this weekend. And hopefully they can. But again, kind of like we talked about before, it certainly throws a wrench into the things. And you'd rather have Christian Beal-Smith and Marshawn Lloyd available. The team is a better team with them. But, you talk about touches. I mean, he had a phenomenal game last week. It seemed like everyone had a touch. It's probably not going to be 60-something points this week. Even if South Carolina's offense is able to get going, you need to find ways to move the ball and incorporate those guys. No question about it. Will the ejection for targeting in the Tennessee game be a factor this week? No, because Nicky Manwari's hit took place in the first half of the Tennessee game. He missed the remaining first half, and then he missed the second half. Now, if that targeting call had took place in the second half, he would have had to miss the first half of the Clemson game. So anytime you see a targeting penalty, depending on where it happens, and it doesn't even matter if it happens the first play of the game in the first quarter, right? You'll miss the remainder of the game. If it happens on the last play of the first half, that acts as a whole half. Now, is that fair? Probably not for some, but that acts as that in the second half. So he'll be eligible to play this week, and South Carolina will certainly need him, but give credit. And oh my goodness, Joe, the young man, 31, that stepped in that did a great job. I just remember numbers. Williams. Thank you. I'm sorry about that, Williams. He did a phenomenal job of stepping on in. Will Lloyd be back Saturday again? He was questionable. He was out on the practice field today, I believe, though. I think that's what Shane Beamer said.
They've been practicing, but I mean, again, it's just like last week. Kind of depends on how they progress and how they feel. But apparently, it's better than recent weeks. So.
Yep. Ridge says, Mike, after Tennessee's showing last week, obviously Clemson is going to make a huge effort to pressure Rattler. How do you think we combat that if we can't get the run game going? Well, we've said it before. The extension of the run game is short passes, screen passes, right? And that's a tremendous way of being able to slow down a good pass rush. And I think Clemson is going to be well aware of that South Carolina is going to want to attack them, not just vertically, but sideline to sideline. And Clemson does a good job of that too. So, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about South Carolina's offense. Defensively, South Carolina did a good job of it last week. Our colleague, Colin Taylor, had the stat that South Carolina only had 5 missed tackles. And I believe he didn't put this part out. I believe 3 of those came in the first series. So got to do a good job disengaging on stock blocks and being able to make tackles this weekend against Clemson. Will young players not from the state understand it will be hostile. It will be a hostile environment, and especially considering the fact that you haven't played there since 2018 because of that COVID season in 2020. I think a lot of people forget that. For a lot of those players, it'll be their first time playing there. Just want to pull this stuff up. We'll get off quick, Joe. How about we play 2 straight great games instead of 1? Yeah, I'll tell you what. If they're able to win this game, goodness. Joe, usually I let you have a final thought. We're going to wrap things up so that, I get the heck out of Gillette Stadium. I don't know if I'm supposed to still be in here, so we're going to get off here. But he's Joe. I'm Mike. We'll have the GC Live post-game show after the game on Saturday. Michael Scarnecchia, I believe, will be on with us, right? Yeah, Scar will be on with us. So everyone have a good Tuesday night. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you guys on Saturday night.
See you.